Okay. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. How is everybody doing by show of hands? So good. Yeah. If you're like me, and I'll share also, Dawn, we're really excited that it's Friday. And so I am really delighted that you all have decided to spend an hour with us. I'm assuming this might be over some of your lunch breaks, and so feel free to eat and take care of yourself as we make our way through this hour together. But my name is Whitney. Like Don said, I serve on the board of M.A.R.C.H, and I also work as the Victims Assistance Coordinator for the Diocese of Kansas City St. Joseph, working with survivors of sexual abuse, and that's similar to the work that I've done for about 10 years or so. And so I personally have experienced compassion fatigue and have many people close to me in my professional and personal circle that I have as well. And so if you come here today having experienced it yourself, you are not alone. And so I want to reassure you of that. So we most definitely need an official icebreaker before we jump into all this material. And so I will ask you, how much does a polar bear weigh? And feel free to take yourself off mute if you want to give a guess and let me know. Not everybody at one time.
2,000 pounds.
Okay, well, I'll tell you. Oh, okay, Lee, you were going to say something. Thank you.
I was gonna say about 900 pounds.
You're probably spot on. I actually don't know how much they weigh. I just know they weigh enough to break the ice. But so thank you for participating. All right, so here's our agenda for the day. And I'm gonna get you guys over to the left here. So we're gonna start out just by talking a little bit about how we can create a safe space together. You know, anytime we come together and we talk about compassion fatigue, burnout, vicarious trauma, just big, heavy topics, we all come to the conversation from a different place. And that's great. That's what makes the conversation really interesting and worthwhile. But it's important to initiate that conversation by talking about what a safe space means to all of us. And we're doing our best together to create that for the next hour. Then we're going to dive into exploring compassion fatigue and actually define it. We're going to talk about the 4 phases of compassion fatigue. Then we'll move into some resiliency and recovery ideas. And we're going to talk about our ABCs and what's your number 1. So these are all strategies for how to identify compassion fatigue and sort of move through or process through it in as healthy a way as possible. So that's a little bit about what our next hour looks like together. By the way, if you have any questions, please feel free. I can't see everyone, so feel free to unmute yourself or shoot us a message in the chat. Don will be reviewing that chat box as we move through. So feel empowered. Okay, so somebody tell me, what do you think creating a safe space together means, and why would we need to do that today? What might it mean to create a safe space together?
I think, hello everybody, my name is Lee Shepherd. I think that creating a safe space would mean trusting the person in regards to the conversation that you all are having, that is going to be between you two collectively or whoever is in that space, and that there's no judgments going on at that time, and you're actually there to try to resolve whatever issue that you are speaking about.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. I think that's a beautiful way to sum it up. So many of you I know are working in one type of helping profession or another, whether you're a mediator, you're working directly with children or families, regardless of your professional background and your expertise, you're working to create change, positive change, and you're working to support people in different capacities. And so with that work, we carry a lot of weight around with us, that emotional weight. And so you're right, Lee, coming together and trying to establish this environment where we can respect each other, not feel judged, those types of things. So two different ways that I think we can create that safe space. So much of what Lee just said. So on the right-hand side, you see a community agreements. Notice these aren't community rules. These aren't things you have to do, but these are things that we want to come together and willingly agree to try and do for one another. So respect one another's opinions, recognize that what is shared here stays here. So confidentiality, which so many of you are familiar with the importance of that concept. There is no stupid or silly question. Compassion fatigue and burnout is so real. And it's okay to ask any kind of question that pops into your head, and know that we'll honor it here. And also just to say that there is the potential to talk about triggering material. Part of the reason we experience burnout and compassion fatigue is because as humans that care, we get overwhelmed and we hear and see a lot. And so if somebody was to share a specific example or a specific struggle, I want you all to feel empowered to take care of yourself if it was to hit you a certain type of way. And so if you need to turn your camera off, if you need to phone a friend, send a text message, drink some water, whatever you need to do to make sure that you're doing okay is we're here for it. And then on the left-hand side, we don't have a lot of time. And so unfortunately, we can't spend a whole lot of time getting to know one another on a first name basis. But you could, in the chat box, if you'd like, give us your name, your pronouns, your place of work, what it is that brings you here today. So please feel to do that and begin some community via the chat box if that feels right to you. Just by show of hands, everybody okay with this idea of safe spaces and community agreements? Is there anything that you want to add or anything that you want to respectfully challenge? Please feel free.
I have a quick comment.
Sure, Charles.
If I may. I find it very difficult to believe that I'm actually gaining somebody's trust in 5 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I think that's
I think I would, and you touched on it. I would use the word respect more than trust, because trust is earned over years. Anybody got anything else with it for that?
Yeah, I heard any of it.
Thank you, Charles. I think that you make a really great point. And I think that if there are those of us on the call that already know one another, that's different, right? But as far as being strangers, really, maybe sharing in common some of the work we do, but coming together and sharing space for a training, I think we are probably all capable of respecting one another, but maybe building trust is a little ambitious for an hour. So that's a fair point.
Well, I was specifically speaking to mediation. I wasn't speaking to our group today.
Okay.
Okay, that I just wanted to clarify that.
Sure. Thank you. I think that makes sense. I think as a mediator, that is challenging. How do you build rapport and trust in a very short period of time if you're not able to really invest a lot in that pre-work? So I think that's a really a big challenge and such an important part of being able to do the work well. So thank you for bringing that up. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add or respond to Charles with regard to that at this point? Thanks again, Charles, for sharing your thoughts. All right, well, we're going to just jump in and start exploring exactly what compassion fatigue is. We'll define it together and go from there. So anybody want to give us your best definition? What is compassion fatigue to you? Keeping in mind it can be different for everybody, but what does it mean to you? I think it's really common, even in my own personal experience, to think about compassion fatigue and burnout as one of the same things. And I do think it can manifest similarly and maybe show up similarly in our lives. But here there's a definition offered by Banner Health, and it says that compassion fatigue is similar to burnout, but burnout usually stems from having too much work or too many responsibilities. By show of hands, who knows what that feels like? And compassion fatigue, on the other hand, comes from helping others. You want to keep helping, but you at some point can become overwhelmed just by the vicarious trauma you might experience, the emotions, the importance of the situations that you are a part of and that you're trying to help manage and help people through. And so I think that's an important to recognize that they can be very similar, fatigue and burnout, but they can also be different in certain ways. So how many of you think that compassion fatigue is pretty common? I'm assuming most of you. I definitely recognize it as common in the fields that we're in. And I think to Dawn's point, 92 people considered signing up for the training. So I think that in and of itself tells you that there's an interest in the topic. It's very human to experience compassion fatigue. There's a recent study in the journal Aging and Mental Health that says that 71% of helping professionals experience high levels of burnout, and as many as almost 60% experience signs of compassion fatigue. And so that's at any given time, right? And of course, compassion fatigue and burnout aren't necessarily linear. It's not something we experience and it goes away forever. It might ebb and flow and come in and out of our professional or personal lives. So again, know that if this is something you're experiencing currently or you have in the past, that's very normal and it's very common. It's very much so a part of experiencing that secondary or tertiary trauma. The signs and symptoms. Tell me by show of hands, or you can take yourself off mute, if any of these symptoms resonate with you. We have chronic exhaustion. We have reduced sympathy or empathy, feelings of anger, dreading work, poor job satisfaction, hypersensitivity, work-life balance is a struggle, and maybe even difficulty sleeping. I don't know about you, but I feel that I've experienced all of these at different times in my career, some of which I've experienced at the same time. I'm kind of flipping through everybody's pictures. You all look very happy, whether you're live or your pictures. Any of these signs or symptoms surprise any of you?
Yeah, that's just Thursday.
Yeah, right. I feel that, Charles. That's just, yeah, that was lunch hour yesterday. I agree.
And for me, I am, I guess number two, in regards to, I am so used to seeing everybody's bad day every day and how they respond to their bad day than they would normally act on a regular day. So I'm like, it's normal for me to see somebody be outraged and show a different side than they normally would be. And it shocks other people. And like, oh my gosh, how did you handle that? But because I see it every day. I hope that makes sense to y'all.
Yeah, I feel that. Anybody else? Does that resonate what we shared about, observing others experiencing these types of things too in their own ways? Yeah. For me personally, I think about victim offender dialogue and situations. Any mediation can be tense. There are a lot of big feelings, a lot of big decisions that are a part of the process. And so it can, people show up all different ways in all different kinds of emotional, mental spaces. And that's all very valid and understandable. And so managing those feelings and knowing how to support and respond is challenging in and of itself, but then also recognizing when you're also feeling those things and finding the strength, right, to continue to support and to do what you do well when you're also feeling these things day after day. It can be really challenging. It can be a super challenging part of the work. I would just encourage you, if you've experienced these like Charles and I yesterday, or at any time, Again, that's very, very common. The good news, however, is that we can recognize and learn to work through those signs and symptoms in as healthy of a way as possible. And so we're going to talk a lot about that today. I really like this quote: one cannot be deeply responsive to the world without being saddened very often. And so, in other words, that vicarious trauma, the stress, the burnout, the fatigue, these are normal human reactions to the burdens that we carry. And I think sometimes we don't talk about the grace that we need to give ourselves. Sometimes we get caught up in the expectation that I'm a professional and I need to manage this well so that I can take care of my clients or advocate, and all of that's true. But there's also this piece of it, we're humans and we need grace. And sometimes it's okay to not be perfect. And sometimes it's okay to recognize I am fatigued, and that's okay. But how do I move through that? Okay, so the 4 phases you need to know. So there are phases to compassion fatigue. And if you've ever experienced compassion fatigue, this probably feels, relatively reasonable to you. You don't normally just wake up one day and go, holy cow, I am so fatigued and I don't want to go to work and I'm totally burnt out. It's usually a process. So let's unpack that. The 4 phases, okay, and this is supported by research. The first phase, you're the idealist. How many of you have ever been the idealist? Yeah, right. I think that's also part of what motivates a lot of us to do this work. We believe in good turnouts. We believe in positive shifts. We believe in the possibilities of mediation and of this work in general helping. And so maybe a lot of us are idealists at heart. So phase 1 is we're in that really good space. Phase 2, we begin to withdraw. Anybody know what that feels like? Have you ever recognized, ooh, I'm kind of withdrawing a little bit? We're going to talk more about exactly what that means. Phase 3 is the irritability master. So this baby's really cute, but he looks quite irritated. So we start to get really irritated or like fatigued at maybe things or processes or people that we normally wouldn't. Okay. And then phase 4, we're the zombie. So we are fatigued, we are burnout, we're not managing the feelings that we're experiencing well, even though they're all valid. And we're generally just in this place where we're just kind of moving along, maybe not really present, maybe not really fully participating in the way that we once did. Okay, so phase 1. So in this stage, a person feels committed, available, ready to make a difference. Staff is willing to work long hours. Enthusiasm is unending. If anybody's ever worked with a recent college graduate, I feel like this is exactly what you see. And it's so refreshing too. It's like, oh my gosh, that was totally me 20 years ago. And it feels really good to connect with somebody who just is approaching the work with this sort of fresh perspective. So they are fully in that zone, and they've idealized the work, and that's good. We need some of that energy. Phase 2, okay. So the second stage is when complaints about work begin to surface. The individual's tired all the time, maybe even avoids talking about work. He or she begins neglecting family, coworkers, clients, him or herself. This feel familiar to anyone? Stage 2? Somewhat, yeah. Thanks, Charles. Me too. Phase 3. So this is the irritability phase. The person starts avoiding patient-client contact, use of humor is strained, lapses of concentration, people distance themselves even further. You notice it says from family and friends. So compassion fatigue, is it something that only happens at work and only stays with us at work? Yeah, it's definitely not, right? It tends to just seep over time because we're just one person. And so we tend to take our work home with us. And if we're tired and we're burnt out, it begins to affect our personal lives and relationships, or it can. And so that's an important point to consider, I think, too. And then that zombie phase. So all hopelessness turns to rage. The person begins to loathe any and all people, including coworkers. Others become incompetent. There's a disdain for patients and clients, and patience is minimal. So I don't know if anybody's brave enough to admit this, but have you ever experienced the zombie phase? Because I certainly have. And I don't say that proudly, but I say that out of self-awareness. And it's not a great place to be because you're not able to really help in the ways that you can and you want to. And I think we can all relate to that. But again, the good news is you don't have to stay in phase 4. Okay. You can move back to phase 1 or back to 2 or 3, just like healing. Healing is not linear. Compassion fatigue and burnout is not linear either. And so it might feel like a lot one day. And with the help of some strategies we're going to talk about and other things, and just your personal ability to manage it, it might get better. And then you might sort of ebb and flow through the phases. So this is the positive part. There are resiliency strategies. There is a route to recovery, if you will. And that's always encouraging. Okay, so some of the things that we can do, we can learn our ABCs, and we're going to talk about what those mean with relation to compassion fatigue. You can figure out your number 1. Again, we're going to talk about what the heck does that mean when it comes to burnout and compassion fatigue. And then we can also talk about the importance of developing a self-care practice or routine. And I feel like that's quite a buzzword these days. We talk about self-care a lot, but I am so enthusiastic about self-care because I really do feel like it's not only really important for all of us as people, but it's one of the best ways that we can ensure that we show up in the best way we can for the people that we are trying to help and serve and care about. All right, who's ready to learn about the ABCs? Anybody? So, thank you, Charles. Thank you, Lee. I feel like I need to see who else is smiling at me. Okay, I'm looking at Angel, Stanley, Megan, Dawn. Anybody else excited? Yeah? If you're like, not really, that's okay. You don't have to fake it. You can just, humor me. Okay, so we're going to learn our ABCs. Here they are. For compassion fatigue, we have awareness, balance, and connection. So this is a strategy for prevention of compassion fatigue, but also response. So most of you are probably pretty self-aware people. You're very caring people. You're very intelligent people. You know over time when you're starting to get irritated or starting to check out or just things are starting to feel like a lot. And so that awareness piece probably comes pretty naturally to most of you. I think, in my opinion, it's the most important of the 3, just that awareness, because it allows us to go, oh, there's something that doesn't feel great. And it allows us to sit in that space and sort of validate it for ourselves and then figure out, okay, I know what will help me move out of this space. So there's this awareness piece, and we're going to talk more about it in a second. Then there's the balance piece. Why do you think balance might be important when it comes to compassion fatigue and either preventing it or responding to it? What do you think? We talk a lot about work-life balance, right? You hear that. Whenever I hear that, it's like, yeah, sometimes I'm great at that, and sometimes I just really suck at it. Sometimes I'm way out of balance. And that's okay. Going back to that awareness piece, right? If I can recognize that, then I can fix it before it becomes a really big issue. But time for both work and home helps us as professionals be the best that we can be, personally and professionally. And then there's this idea of connection, which for all of us, we understand the importance of community, not only in this work, but in our personal lives. Connecting with people that do similar work that you can trust. To Charles' point, it takes time to build trust, but hopefully over time you've built trust with coworkers or people that you share in this work with. And that can be a really important resource when it comes to moving through compassion fatigue. I don't know about all of you. I tend to be a person who wants to fix everything. I want to be the positive one. It's hard for me to say, I am on the struggle bus. Can you please listen to me? Can you validate me? Can you help me? It just doesn't come naturally for me because I like to be that person for others. And so if you're like me, I think it's important to just take a moment and go, I deserve that community too. I deserve that support too. And I'll give it back twofold, right? Okay. Gosh, I feel like I'm talking an awful lot. Hopefully nobody's too bored out of their mind. I see a lot of smiles, which is a good indication. Nobody's sleeping that I can see. So that's great as well.
You're doing a good job.
Well, thank you very much. Like I said, if you have anything to add, feel free to unmute and chime in. I trust that you're not a terribly rowdy bunch, so I think we would be okay. Okay, so let's dive a little bit deeper into this idea of awareness. So to increase awareness, one of the things you can do is look back on experiences in your career that led to that fatigue, where you were feeling really frustrated, really irritated with processes, with people, whatever it might be, and try to identify those triggers. In the work that I do, working specifically with victims and survivors, I talk about triggers all day long because that's such a big part of a survivor's reality, is being triggered. And I think in general, as professionals in this work and as a society, we don't really talk about how we're all triggered by different things and behaviors for lots of different reasons all the time. And so I think it's helpful if you can take some time and identify, if you haven't already, what is it that triggers me about this coworker, this particular client, this particular process? And it can help you figure out how to strategize and move through those situations. Granted, I know that's easier to say than to do, but I think just putting words to it can be really helpful sometimes. It takes you out of that place of I'm feeling this, and it puts you in this place of, oh, that's what I'm feeling. Okay. And then all of a sudden, sometimes you can strategize for how to work through it a bit differently. So knowing your triggers can make you less vulnerable to compassion fatigue over the long haul. Anybody ever had experiences with this where you feel like I did a pretty good job recognizing what was actually going on, what I was feeling, and that helped me kind of move through?
Well, my own behavior will change. When my ego gets bruised, then if words start coming out that should not be coming out, not bad words or anything like that, but when I start trying to protect myself, that's the key to pull back on that and reevaluate. I shouldn't. Once again, talking about a mediation. If I'm starting to be on the defensive, for me, that's my clue to reevaluate the situation.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I see. Are you raising your hand, Lee?
Yeah, mine is also, knowing your triggers, mine would be like the word look. They're probably like, what? Look, that's crazy. But, when people come and they talk to you and say, Lee, I heard you got your little degree, heard you got your little job and thinking you're okay now. And they were trying to say it as if in a positive manner, but I perceived it as being demeaning or devalued. And so when you know your triggers, you're able to guard it now and you recognize it. So when somebody now comes and says, hey, Lee, I see you got your little career, your little job. Now I am responding with thank you. And I keep it moving. And because of that, now they have to communicate with me differently because I didn't give them the response that they were expecting.
Thank you both for sharing. I feel like that's really what you both shared to me is so significant, and I'm sure it resonates with so many people. I mean, how we show up during a mediation, during any day, the work that we're doing with clients is really important. And obviously that's why we're talking about compassion fatigue, because it directly impacts how we are able to show up. I mean, not only mentally, emotionally, but physically also. If anybody's familiar with the book, The Body Keeps the Score, that really dives into how trauma impacts our bodies. That's very real. If you haven't read it, it's an amazing book. It really dives into the neuroscience of trauma. And so even if we're not those primary victims of trauma, if we're absorbing that secondary, that vicarious trauma, we're storing it somewhere. And that affects how we show up. And also, Charles, to your point, we all have an ego, right? We all have our personal responses to words people use. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of what makes us human. But being able to recognize that and go, oh my gosh, that's triggering me, and work through that can help, to your guys' point, help you. Okay, I'm going to lean back and try to change my approach, or I'm going to look at this differently, this word differently. I mean, that's really, that's complex work. That's a lot of self-awareness. I think that's really remarkable. So thank you both for sharing.
Did you recommend a book? You mentioned there was a book title.
Yes, it's called The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, are you familiar with it?
Familiar, I haven't read.
Okay. Well, if you're, I mean, it's not a fun read. It's not like riveting, like, woo, let me go read The Body Keeps the Score, but it is really fascinating. And I think it's so relative, not only to the work that we do as mediators and as helping professionals, but also it helps us to understand our clients and why they're showing up the way that they are. In Dawn's TED Talk, she talks about taking a trauma-informed approach to mediation. And so we have to understand trauma and how it's showing up in our lives and in other people's lives in order to be present in a certain way. So I highly suggest the book if you haven't read it. It's definitely worth the read. Okay, so we've got this awareness piece, also the balance piece. So thinking about work-life balance, ask yourself the following questions. And I'd like you to actually think about this in real time. Do you make time for the things that you enjoy doing on a regular basis? Do you make time for those things? What's a hobby that I've always wanted to do but never made time for it? Do you have something that comes to mind? I can think of a million things. I'm like, oh yeah, I want to do that. I want to learn this, but I don't make time for it, right? What could I do to feel more relaxed in my life? That can help you, I think, especially for me, and I don't know if anybody here can relate, shifting my mind and my body, mind, and my spirit from work Whitney to I'm at home, now I'm mom Whitney, right? And so I think that work-life balance sort of requires some transitionary time, maybe in between the two. So that's something to think about. And making space for things that make you happy outside of work. If you can do that regularly, of course, it helps you to either avoid the compassion fatigue or move through it in a different way. Anybody want to share? Do you make time for the things you enjoy doing? Or is there something you've always wanted to do that you never have done that you think might help you with this whole concept of balance, bring more relaxation into your life?
Whitney, this is Dawn. One of the things that I had to do is make sure I put things on my calendar. So if I want to make time for fun, I have to put it on my calendar. I hate to say these things out loud. The other thing that was really helpful for me was shifting from what I would call the self-employment world to a quote unquote structured organization where we take holidays. When I was self-employed, I did not take holidays. I never felt like I had to find times off. Whereas now, like when the organization shuts down because of the state holiday, I really tried to do that now. It took a couple years to transition. It wasn't like an easy thing to do. But now I'm 4 years into it and I can finally take a holiday and not feel guilty. This feels weird saying this out loud, but the work-life balance is something that you really have to work for. It doesn't just happen.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And everything you said resonates. It is, it's okay to build time into your calendar to say, I need to have fun. I need to connect with my kiddo. I need to connect with my spouse or my best friend. I need to breathe. I used to put that on my calendar, breathe. And it really helped. It really helped. I never really actually stopped and breathed at that time, I don't think, but it was just seeing it on my calendar reminded me. But you're so right, Dawn. It takes intention, this idea of balance. Yeah, thank you. And what do you all think about I'll just say our society in general. Do you think it promotes work-life balance, or do you think it promotes productivity and more, and this idea of constantly accomplishing something?
I don't know. I think for me, and Don, you should never feel embarrassed about scheduling fun, because I put that on my calendar too. Fun, nap time. I mean, how many of us would love to just have like we were in preschool? Why did they take away nap time and recess? Those are two things that we probably would really, really enjoy as adults. But I'm sorry, what was your question? I already got lost. What
Oh,
was the
you're,
question?
I forgot my question because I was really
Okay.
listening.
We can just sit and talk.
yes, thank you for validating, Dawn. That's exactly right. And then I forgot what I even asked,
I
but
think you were asking about the balancing thing, and I wanted to just contribute that. I don't know. I don't think I subscribe well to the balance thing. For me, that means trying to hold up several things at the same time. And I've just learned at this age, I'm not effective. So what I do is just prioritize one or two things at that time. For me, mentally, that works. And this whole notion of trying to balance stuff. So, but I do understand the concept, and I do understand that we have to be very intentional about all the things that we feel help us to be safe and to be healthy. Even, I read a book that talks about we should make rest part of our success plan. And many times we neglect that. But rest really is it restores us. So for those that are advocates of napping, I have started to really do that more. Even little 30-minute power naps. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate your thought. I totally agree with you. Naps and recess, I mean, in a very real way, I think are really healthy, to your point. And I don't know why they take that away when we become adults, but I think we should advocate for that. For real.
Let's form an advocacy group. Yeah.
Let's do that. I am willing to make that a priority. No, and I really appreciate your point too about this idea of balance. It's kind of like, I don't know. I think there's always this kind of underlying expectation in society that we can do things perfectly. And so I think you make a good point that balance isn't it. Maybe you're prioritizing one thing over another. So I think that that's a great way to look at it too. Thank you. And then the third is connection, this idea of community, identify a potential accountability partner. Ideally, this is someone who's not afraid to, you're not afraid to be real with, and they're not afraid to be real with you back. This is someone you can turn to when you need to vent, or if you need to process a difficult case, with respect to confidentiality, and also, building and maintaining your connections just in general, so that community can really surround you and help you be sort of proactive in this work. Some of us, I think, are blessed with coworkers where that might be the vibe, that might be the safe space. But I've also worked in places where I didn't feel like I could create that safe space with others, and so that's a challenge too. Anybody have thoughts on this idea of connection or community, as it relates to either preventing compassion fatigue or responding, when you find yourself kind of experiencing it?
Oh, Whitney, I want to do a quick plug real fast. This was brought up in a couple different areas lately. And so we at M.A.R.C.H, starting in like January, February, are going to start a monthly, I'm not going to call it a support group. I don't know what we're going to call it yet, but where people can feel safe and just kind of share case scenarios in a confidential setting, if you will, just to help people kind of process emotions. And so that's going to be run by, she's getting her master's in social work. Her name is Melissa. Actually, I think Melissa's on here somewhere. I don't know. So Melissa's going to run that group for us. Dion says, call it a power group. I don't know why, but I feel tired already just reading that. I'm like, we're going to call it the rest group.
Are you gonna?
But yes, I think we're heading in the right direction with that. So anyway, if you are interested in being part of that group, I'm going to send my email address right now to everyone. dcoolman@marchmediation.org. And if you're interested in being part of the power group or the rest group, whatever you want to call it, send that to me, and we're starting a list. And so, but just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, Whitney, and just how important this is, because I do feel like a lot of us are just solo or private practitioners, and we are in these silos, and being in a silo can be really lonely. And so just finding ways to, oh, somebody said a recharge and regroup. Okay, these are good. I like you guys. Hey, just as an FYI, we're also looking for titles or for our upcoming podcast we're going to launch in 2024. And so power down. There we go. Deanne King, that's just going there. I like this. So anyway, hey, if you have a podcast name idea, send that to me as well. You guys are very creative. So anyway, all right, I'll shut up now. Back to Whitney.
No, I love it. We're multitasking. This is great. I'm excited, and I think I'm going to join that group too. So that sounds great, especially if it's like if I leave it feeling empowered, maybe even get to take a nap in the interim. I mean, I'm down for that. Have some good food. Okay.
Love it.
Okay, so these are the ABCs, y'all, of compassion fatigue, something to keep in mind. The next strategy is what's your number one, okay? And this is super simple. It's just essentially thinking through and being intentional about what's your number one? What's a one thing, a person, a mantra, practice? Maybe it's a physical exercise. Maybe it's spiritual. Maybe it could be anything. But what's one thing that you can kind of keep in your back pocket and you can recognize when I'm experiencing some vicarious trauma, when I'm triggered personally, I just feel overwhelmed, when I feel like I'm in that silo and I don't have somebody to reach out to right now. What can you do to kind of fill up your cup a little bit and try to find a little bit of balance? So is it I said mediation, I meant meditation. So you know where my head was. So is it a meditation or prayer? Is it a person that you know you can lean on? Is it a quote or a mantra? Is it a gratitude practice? That's something that's helpful for me. Is it yoga? That's something as someone who teaches yoga, I really appreciate that practice of kind of getting out of my own head and just kind of feeling and processing what's going on in a physical way. So I would challenge you to think about just for a minute, what's your number one? Maybe you already know what it is and you already do this, and that's amazing. But maybe you don't really have anything established and it could be helpful for you to try something on. So I would invite you to take a minute and think about it. Maybe write it down on a piece of paper or on your phone. I don't know if anybody has their number one that they'd like to share that has worked well for them.
If there's time, I take a walk.
Mediations, definitely.
I love that, Charles. Thank you.
My camera's not working, so my face isn't going to come up. But for me, it's I have a horse, and so I try to make sure that I get out to see him. Even if I don't ride, at least I'm getting out there and being active, and also just being in the presence of an animal that I like being around.
I love that. Thank you both for sharing, and I love that that you're both talking about nature too. To a degree, I think nature can be really healing and really help us kind of find some equilibrium in those harder moments. It seems like, okay, just having this one practice, this one thing kind of maybe makes it feel simple. Like, how could that really help me with preventing compassion fatigue? What are your thoughts on that? Because I find it's very effective, but I find it also interesting that it's something so simple that we can learn to integrate that maybe just feels really natural to us. Why do you think that's so powerful in terms of prevention or moving through the fatigue?
I make it a practice to walk every day for 20 minutes. I've been blessed with an amazing wooded trail behind my home, but I literally have to touch the trees and I have to feel the leaves. Like, I feel like I have to connect, like you said, with nature on some level every day. And if I don't, I literally feel like a wilting flower. And so it's just, I really have to have that. I mean, even if it's snow on the ground, I'm in my duck boots and I'm bundled up, I have to do that every day, or I don't feel good at all.
Thank you, Dawn. I think, to me, what you're describing is just this really beautiful grounding practice where you're
Yeah.
literally grounding to the earth
Yeah.
and to nature. And I love that because I think that can be so incredibly powerful. And granted, that looks different for all of us, which is totally great. But whatever grounds you and makes you feel really like connected to your own self or to a higher power or to God or whatever you believe in or whatever you need, whatever motivates you, spiritually and emotionally, I think can be really powerful. So just keeping in mind what's your number one. And if you don't have one, again, that's okay. But challenge yourself this next week. What's a number one that I could try on and see how it works for you? And if it doesn't work well, just keep trying different things on and you'll find something that feels good and helps you kind of ground in those tougher moments. And this is I think, can also be a really big part of your self-care practice too, which is the third strategy. But really looking at self-care not as a reactive thing or something that you have to go buy or pay for. I mean, those are great, pedicures and massages or buying something that you want. Those things can fulfill a need and make us feel better. But a real self-care practice can be something as simple as forgiving yourself, which is not simple, by the way, or saying no, setting boundaries. So it can be much more on this mental, emotional level, and something that takes a lot of, self-awareness. I don't know if y'all think about self-care a lot. I do. I think it's really so amazing and important, but also can be really challenging. Not always easy to say no or to set boundaries or ask for what you need. But figuring out what your self-care practice needs to be for you can be really powerful and help prevent burnout and fatigue. So I'd like you to take a minute and think about, how do you already practice self-care? And maybe you write this down as well next to your number one that you're going to try or that already works for you. How do you already practice self-care first and foremost? And or if you don't, or if it's not working for you, you're allowed to change your self-care routine. So what's one new way that you can try and practice self-care? For me right now, I'm trying to take a step back. When I want to get involved and fix something, I'm trying to lean back, and instead of respond or react, I'm trying to respond with intention and thoughtfully a couple days later. And that's become a big part of my self-care routine. So that's where I'm at as a person. Does anybody want to share maybe something they've been working on self-care wise or they'd like to work on?
The other day, I get all of my inspiration from Facebook memes, but anyway, somebody had posted something about, there's a reason why your windshield is bigger than your rear view mirror, in the sense of you're looking forward, you're looking through the big picture versus when you're trying to drive backwards through that little mirror, life just doesn't work. It's not as easy. And so I like this whole idea of forgiving yourself. Like, that chapter was written for better or for worse. It is what it is. And now we're trying to write the next chapter, but people want to go back and rewrite, and then they stay stuck and they do all, so anyway, I was just thinking about that little Facebook meme thing when I was looking at the forgiving yourself.
I was thinking that whatever it is, and you touched on it also, Whitney, it doesn't matter what you do, but I think it's more important that the consistency.
Mm-hmm. Thank you both. Thank you both. The windshield, example, Don, resonates with me too. I love that. And to your point, Charles, maybe it's less about what you're doing and just, are you doing it consistently? And are you giving yourself permission to change if it doesn't work for you? You can change it. And then try that consistently for a while, right? So I love that too, that it can be sort of permeable, right? And it can move in the ways that we need it to move. And that's a good way to look at it, because work is different all the time. Personal life is different all the time. Life feels different from time to time. And so how we take care of ourselves and what we're focusing on naturally is going to be different and shift accordingly. So I love that idea.
One of the things that I'm thinking about when I look at this list is, I think it's the book Atomic Habits. He talks about just making 1 degree of change. So he makes the example of a plane. If a plane makes 1 degree change, it changes the whole trajectory of that flight. And just thinking about ourselves, I always tell myself the goal in life is to do more of what I think is going to get me in that direction versus, the behaviors that don't. Because I'm still going to have behaviors that don't move me in the trajectory that I want to go all the time. But if I'm doing the behaviors more that I want, then I keep thinking to myself, that's that 1 degree that gets me to where I want to be. So just looking at this list, thinking about, what's just 1 degree? Because I think people think they have to make all these major radical changes, and then it gets overwhelming, and then they just shut down. But just thinking about the 1 degree of change that all of us can make every day, and it doesn't have to be something huge per se, but it can change the course of things.
I'm over here like snapping because I think you're so right on about that. I think it is easy to go, I need a self-care plan. I need to do yoga and drink water. And, I need to only eat healthy food. And then I need to do this and that. And it's really about, being trauma informed with yourself too, as much as we try to be with other people. Where am I at and what can I do and what feels good? And that's enough. And it can be that 1 degree, and that is enough. So I love that.
And I use that in mediation too. I'm like, what's the 1 degree of change that the parties can change? Because otherwise it's too overwhelming for them too. When you think about everything in really big pictures, you just become immobilized. And so, the 1 degree I think is really helpful just in all areas.
Thank you, Dawn. I love that. Awesome. Okay, so we've learned about the ABCs, we've learned about the number 1 and this idea of self-care, all as ways to prevent and ways to help us respond and kind of sit in that space when we recognize we are feeling that burnout or fatigue. And I hope you found some of this conversation to be helpful. I want to be mindful of time. I know we have about 6 or 7 minutes left. But self-reflection, I think, is so important, and really we've been sharing and doing that throughout this time together. But I really feel it's important when you attend a training, you want to take away something. So I really would love for you to think about what's one takeaway from today. It could be something that someone said, something that was on a slide, a big concept, a little concept. But what's one thing that you could take away and truly think about or integrate or just consider tomorrow, this next week, into your professional world? Yeah.
Hello, Whitney.
Yes. Hi.
This is Stan Brash talking. And I think what I've learned from this class is we have a responsibility to take care of ourselves. And from that, we're able to take care of other people and be positive, and everything will work out fine. And thank you for bringing all these out.
Of course. I feel like you should have just said that at the beginning and we all could have been like, yes, Dan, you're right.
And Dawn made a lot of good comments. So thank you, Dawn.
I tried to stay quiet for as long as possible, and then I just couldn't hold myself anymore.
Outstanding. Great job for both of you. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks, Stan. Anybody else want to share? I love Stan's approach. Take care of yourself so you can take care of others. Yes, 100%. And
Whitney, this is Dion again. I really appreciated you simplifying the ABCs, and I think those are just good concepts and an easier way for us to just think about and be reminded of that. So I appreciate, and that was my takeaway. I took a screenshot. I hope that's okay. But
totally. Yes.
I want to keep it in my phone so I can remind myself.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you for the feedback. I do that too all the time. I see things and I'm like, ooh, I need to think about this. And then I have like 500 things that I'm supposed to be thinking about.
Great.
But it's nice to run across one of those every once in a while.
Yes. Thank you for doing this. This was really good.
Of course. Happy to do it. Well, I'm open to Q&A, closing thoughts, like this really cute puppy. It's Friday. We're all ready to check out for the day. Maybe you have some things that you need to do before that. So, I support you. But Dawn, I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you all so much for your participation and being here today, and just the hard work that you do each and every day and the impact that you make. I feel that, and yeah, so thank you for that work.
Okay, so and if you wanted to read through some of the chats, Whitney, and see if there's anything in there, just in terms of just thoughts or that people had, but some housekeeping stuff. You will receive an email with Gretchen says she's going to schedule one lunch with a friend each month and at least one other thing you enjoy. Put it on the calendar. Absolutely.
I love that.
Okay, Melanie, I am talking about that right now. So you're going to receive a post-training email. Stan says you did an absolutely wonderful job, Whitney. I got to stop reading the chat so I can get through my spiel. Okay, let me stop reading that. So, thank you for today. Thank you for attending. Everyone loves the calendar idea. Apparently, things that I was embarrassed about is like other people saving grace. See, that's how the world works, right? You have to share with everybody, and then we all come together and problem solve. So, in this post-training email that I'm going to send, it's going to talk about how this training is going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel on March. All of you now are going to be registered for the March mediation newsletter. If you receive the newsletter and then you don't want to be on there, just unsubscribe. It's super easy. But it has all these free trainings. There's lots of good nuggets in there. Dion's told me she loves it. It's one simple page. She says, I actually read your newsletter, Dawn. It's one page. It's super simple and you can move on, but it just keeps you in the know with what's going on with us at M.A.R.C.H. And like I said, free trainings that are happening. So in this post-training email that you're going to get, there's also going to be a certificate in there. It's got the M.A.R.C.H CLE number on there. It's going to have a Kansas affidavit in there. This was originally set to be taught in September. However, that affidavit is still good for this year. So even though the Kansas affidavit said September, it is still good for now. So anyway, I think that's it. Everything. Oh, and then if you could fill out a quick, somebody's asking for the PowerPoint. Whitney, would you be willing to share the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, she can send that to me and then I will include that in the post training email as well. I'm going to write myself a note so I don't hit send on that. Doris says thank you for that. And if anybody, if you need to go, feel free to go ahead and jump off. I'm going to stop recording. And then if anybody has questions or thoughts or wants to make a chat, we can keep going just for a few more minutes.